Now, the Enyobeni tavern inquest is underway in the Mdantsane Magistrate's Court. A Human Rights Commission probe found that some liquor laws related to minors were broken. For a recap on some of the issues that the Enyobeni tragedy highlights in the sale and provision of liquor, I am now joined by convener of National Liquor Traders Lucky Ntimane. Mr. Ntimane, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I take it you've also been listening to the proceedings that have been taking place this morning inside that magistrate's court. As the National Liquor Traders, what are your thoughts now that this is finally underway?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Indeed, we've been following the inquest as a result of the Enyobeni tragedy that took place almost 2 years ago. And for us, it is important that we follow these proceedings because we believe that the outcomes of these will also be able to help us develop a proper approach in dealing with the issue of underage drinking. I think this is something that we as a country have managed to sweep under the carpet. The fact that kids younger than 18 who should not be having access to alcohol actually do have access to alcohol and are able to buy it freely across all the townships in the country. I think it's high time that we accept that reality, but I think that we face this reality with a sober mind that we should be able to find solutions to ensure that our kids are not nurtured towards alcohol, but are nurtured towards schooling, education, and also sporting activities that will grow them as adults. As it stands now, kids find entertainment in alcohol, and it shouldn't be. And Enyobeni highlights that if you look at the posters, were very clear on what was to be expected on that day from the patrons that will be attending the event, albeit the patrons were indeed kids. So this should not be able to happen in our country. In fact, we are on record as saying that the issue of a tavern and a minor should not be in one sentence. That should not be. So we are following this so that we can find a solution. And we are grateful that the Human Rights Commission came with the report that highlighted where the issues were. We are hoping that the inquest will be able to supplement that so that we can find long-lasting solutions that will deal with the issue of underage drinking in South Africa.
And as you're speaking about accepting the reality and obviously not, burying our heads in the sand to the realities that are there, that face us in society. Earlier this morning, we also had our reporter who's following those proceedings, Sipakema, speaking to the owners of Enyobeni Tavern, saying that they still deny that they did anything wrong. And in fact, the owner went on to say that they have only been found to have sold to one person who is underage, and even still saying that that person who was underage should have been charged and not himself as the owner of the establishment, because that person who was underage is the one that deceived his staff. Do you get a sense that they understand the gravity and the laws surrounding liquor and minors in this country?
I think the arrogance of the outlet owner and his partner is clear for everyone to see. And I think we're dealing with the issue here that requires that we become sensitive, because lives were lost, not just any lives, but lives of those that had a much brighter future ahead of them, lives of the kids, 21 of them, all gone because the outlet owner allowed his space to become what is now known as a crime scene, almost effectively becoming a mortuary, where 21 bodies lay dead there, and outlet owner has enough to come and say that he has no responsibility for 21 lifeless bodies lying in his establishment. So I think we need to condemn, these acts. It's very barbaric at best, but also inhumane, if one can say. So we feel that, at least you should take accountability that these acts where people lost their lives happened at this establishment. They didn't happen anywhere else. They didn't happen outside the establishment, but it happened within the four walls of his establishment. So we are saying, and we're on record as saying this, that we feel that the outlet owner should be criminally liable for whatever happened there, irrespective of whether those kids bought alcohol in that establishment or not, but they were allowed to access those premises, which is against the law.
Yeah, and while you're mentioning that, of course, the owner should be held criminally liable. The owner himself this morning saying that 5,000 Rand fine was actually too much. It was too excessive. They feel that it shouldn't have come up to 5,000 Rands only. But also, when you're having a situation like this where the owners are just failing to take accountability and we've got so many loss of lives here, what does that say and what message does that give out for the industry? It can't bode well.
No, it certainly doesn't bode well for the industry, but I think also it shines a light in terms of the suitability of individuals to acquire a liquor license to sell alcohol, because it certainly comes with a lot of responsibility when one has liquor license to ensure that they sell alcohol in a responsible manner and also to the right patrons that of the right legal drinking age. We met with the Eastern Cape Liquor Board 2 weeks ago, together with our partners, Heineken Beverages, to look at issues that we can address together, especially around the issue of underage drinking. And I'm happy to say that, out of that meeting, we are going to launch 3 programs in East London, Port Elizabeth and Mthatha that are going to focus on liquor traders, but also getting commitment from them to ensuring that they follow the basic laws of their license conditions, which is something that the owner of Enyobeni clearly failed to adhere to. And we feel that these programs are required or needed, not just in the Eastern Cape, but across the country, as we alluded earlier, that the issue of underage drinking happens across all townships in the country. It's not just restricted to the Eastern Cape.
And as you're saying, you already, as recently as 2 weeks ago, you already had a meeting there in that province as well to just try and continue addressing this problem too. Do you find that following this tragedy, there is a bit of a difference in terms of specifically tavern owners and how they are implementing the laws there?
One is tempted to say nice things, but having the reality is that nothing has really changed. The rotten apples still continue to sell to minors unabated. Liquor traders still continue, those that are in the minority, to not comply with the basic laws of how they should sell alcohol. Some don't even close on time. Those that are supposed to close at a certain time will then use the extra hours to make extra buck. And hence, we have always made the plea that our traders need to put the livelihoods and lives of our people first before the profits. But we do know, because if we fail to take accountability and responsibility that these things are happening, it means we're not going to look at solutions. So we need to admit first that these things are happening so that we can all find solutions together to ensure that those that do not deserve to get liquor licenses should not actually be brought into our space to be selling alcohol. So as we make that call to liquor boards that they need to be strict in how they issue licenses, it can't just be like you're dishing out sweets. But people that get these licenses ought to know that they've got a much bigger responsibility in their communities in ensure that the alcohol that they sell is consumed by people that are of the right drinking age, but also people that will obey the laws of the country after having consumed this alcohol.
Mr. Ntimane, I actually appreciate your honesty as well about the reality of the situation as well, because it is quite startling to look at too. Who's not doing their job? You mentioned, the liquor boards as well, that they need to be stricter in issuing liquor licenses. But who else should be coming to the party here?
I think we've got a strong civil society and NGOs that operate in our communities. I think what has not happened in the past is that we have not come together to find solutions that will better our communities and society. So the alcohol industry will do its own thing. The NGOs and community leaders will do their own thing. So I think we actually need a round table or some summit of some sort that will ensure that we all toe the line in addressing this issue of underage drinking. But on the bigger overall picture is that we as a country have an interesting drinking culture, which doesn't bode well to responsible drinking. So we need to be able to address that underlying issue. What causes people to drink alcohol in a responsible manner? Because we know as a country that people tend to drink too much. And that feeds into the underage drinking that we see within our communities. So we need a long-lasting solution, but that cannot happen if it's only done by the alcohol industry. It's a community-wide approach. It's a societal-wide approach that requires everyone hands on deck to ensure that we find a long-lasting solution to this.
Yeah, and just going back to the owner as well, that's just that statement to say that if a minor is found in his establishment, that minor is the one that needs to be charged for deceiving his staff. Also mentioning the appearance of some of the underage people who go to these establishments, that they seem and appear and look older, but that isn't enough. That isn't sufficient. Surely there should be checks and balances in place where you check IDs at the entrance of your establishment too. Do you think enough education and awareness is also being put on the establishment owners as well?
I think it's absurd for the outlet owner to actually say that in the midst of what we're dealing with now, the tragedy of massive proportions in the country, to say that a minor should be the one who feels ashamed of going into an outlet. But the responsibility lies with the person who's got a liquor license, in this case, the outlet owner, who, when there's a reasonable apprehension that a person coming to the establishment is not of the right legal age, they ought to ask for the identification. In other countries or other parts of the world, you cannot access liquor establishments if you do not have an identification. So I think in South Africa, maybe that's the conversation that we need to start having, to say maybe it must be forced upon liquor traders to demand this identification for people that are coming to the establishment. Because what we have picked up in various townships is that the underage are now accessing the liquor from shopping centers. So after school, they'll change their uniform into civilian clothes and walk into a bottle store at a shopping center and be able to buy this alcohol because it's much cheaper at a shopping center than it is at a tavern, for example. So this issue should not only be reserved as a discussion point for taverns, but it's an alcohol industry-wide issue that also involves the big retailers who do not have time to check for the identifications of those that are coming to the establishment. So I think we need to look at this and cast the net wide to say, how then do we address this as a much bigger problem in South Africa rather than just it being a tavern issue?
Yeah, it is quite a holistic issue too. Thank you so much for your time and your insights this morning. That was Liquor Traders Lucky Ntimane, who's from the National Liquor Traders.